Okay. Hi, my name is Miss Kate Noble, and I'm a business and marketing teacher at the High School of Fashion Industries. Today we have Aliza Licht with us, and she's going to be sharing with us some great insight into her career and advice for any students that are interested in this similar career. So, first off, how long have you been in the industry that you're a part of?
So I have been in the fashion industry since 1996.
Okay. And how did you actually get your start? Was it like you knew somebody or you studied this in college?
It's actually a funny story. I grew up loving fashion in high school. My
Hmm.
walls in my bedroom were covered in magazine editorial, but it was the 80s and I didn't really understand that that was a job.
Hmm.
So when I was in high school, when I met with, my guidance counselor before college, it was very much like these are the paths that people take. And they were all pretty standard. It was like doctor, lawyer, teacher, etc.
Right.
And I happened to love science and I was also artistic. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll be a doctor, maybe I'll be a plastic surgeon.
Hmm.
So I went to college thinking I'm pre-med. And I actually graduated with a degree in neurobiology and physiology because I stayed on that track until my junior year when I did this very intensive internship at a hospital
Okay.
and hated it.
Mm.
It's really ironic now. One of the main reasons I hated it, and I had a superficial reason and then a serious reason. The superficial reason, which you'll laugh, was I did not want to wear a mask all day.
You had to show off your lipstick and your makeup.
So that worked out really well. The serious reason was that I just felt like I wanted to be in like a very I'm like super positive and energetic, and it just felt like the environment was like a constant drain. And
Mhm.
at the time, my grandmother lived with us, and she was also on her decline. So I felt like I had a hospital at home. I was in a hospital
Mhm.
internship. It just all felt like wrong.
Yeah.
So I really made the bold decision to say, you know what, I'm not going to do this, even though it was too late to change my major.
Right.
And I, at that point, had realized that I really wanted to work in a fashion magazine.
Hmm.
So when everyone went to Europe after college, I decided to apply for an internship. And I ended up getting an internship at Harper's Bazaar in the accessories department. And that is what started my career in fashion.
Wow. So, what advice would you give someone that has a background in something else? Like you said, you were more in the medical background, but then you actually were hired for an internship in fashion. Like, what do you think enabled you to actually get your foot in the door, even though your background wasn't really in that
Yeah.
field just yet?
So great question. I did two things. The first thing I did my senior year was get magazine experience. I went to the University of Maryland. So I called up Washingtonian Magazine, which is a local regional magazine there, and I said, I'll do anything. I really just want to have magazine experience because this is
Hmm.
what I want to do when I graduate. And I ended up getting an internship in sales
Mm.
in advertising. And when I got to the internship, I learned really quickly that pitching, ad units and sales was not really something that I wanted to do long term.
Hmm.
But I really did pay attention to what the team in editorial were doing
Hmm.
and spent a lot of time when I was done with my sort of call list. I would walk around and say, do you guys need any help? Like, can I shadow you? Can I, get a glimpse at your day?
Hmm.
So they were really, really open. And one of the best things that happened was it was my last day of the internship. And I said to my supervisor, I'm like, thank you so much. This has been an incredible experience. Do you have any parting advice?
Mm.
And he said, well, if you want to work in a magazine in New York, you should pitch the two big publishing houses, Hearst and Condé Nast. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I had never heard of them.
Mm.
So I didn't realize that all the magazines were basically under one roof. So that was like the best tip of all time. And then when I sort of narrowed my focus and realized, okay, I want to apply to Vogue, I want to apply to Harper's, WL, whatever magazines I was interested in, I decided, there was going to be nothing on my resume, my very, very short resume,
Hmm.
that was going to be impressive or relevant to them.
Hmm.
I had nothing. So I went the really sincere, honest route of saying, I set out to be a doctor. I really thought I was going to be one. I love fashion. My entire room was covered in pages of Harper's Bazaar. I didn't know that was a job when I went to college. And I would appreciate if they could possibly help me correct my mistake.
Mm-hmm.
So really, really honest. And I guess, I got lucky. The person who got that letter was like, you know what, let's give her a chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being authentic to yourself really paid off.
Yeah, because it's not like I had like any experience that was, nothing other than reading magazines.
Right.
We all can say we have.
Yeah. That's great. What would you say in terms of like communication skills or any other kind of like soft skills would be beneficial to someone? Because, I feel like you definitely weren't afraid to go after what you wanted, but I think, being able to articulate yourself well and things like that definitely probably helped in this sense.
So I have a career mentorship book, Leave Your Mark. And through my website, I mentor a lot of people around the world. And a student reached out this week who's in high school in another state.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, she really wants an internship in fashion. She's in high school now. And, do I have any advice? And she didn't, ask me to go over her resume, but I intuitively, like I always kind of want to see who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
So I opened her resume, and one of the things that struck me is the way she was speaking about her experience was as if she already had 20 years.
Mm.
So experienced leader in creative direction. It's like, honey, you were in high school.
Yeah.
You have not done anything yet. And while I applaud her sort of confidence, it makes her look really naive in the way that she's presenting herself. So I literally emailed her and I said, can you please call me? Which is probably really scary when you think about it, like a stranger. Call me now.
Yes.
She called me. I said, listen, I didn't want to put this in an email because I didn't want you to be offended, but I really need to walk through your resume with you. Yeah. So aside from the way she positioned herself, so I think, bullet point one is know where you stand in the world as far as experience. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being a high school student applying for an internship, right? So that's, you're eager to learn. And so that's number one. Number two is the inconsistencies in her resume. So some things were capitalized, some things were sentence cased, some things were indented, 2 spots over, some things were one time. She used periods in some bullet points, others not. So I basically was like, I'm probably very extreme because I want to help so much that I literally saved her resume as a PDF and then marked up the entire thing, probably like how you would grade a paper. Yeah. Because it's just easier to show it and say it.
Absolutely.
So you have to be that paper is the only piece of evidence that you're showing an employer as to how detail oriented you are. How do you communicate? How do you position yourself on the page? What does it look like? This girl's resume, when she sent it to me, was various shades of pink. And I explained to her, like, what if you apply somewhere and the person who's opening this hates pink? Like, let's not give people a reason to reject you before they've even read a word.
Exactly.
So I think that's really important. I'll also say that I have two resources that I want to share. One is I wrote a really comprehensive piece for Forbes on best practices on a resume for any age. And I interviewed different recruiters in fashion to give feedback, because one of the things that I wanted to know, because I feel like I know what I like, but maybe I am really specific. So it's a really, really comprehensive piece on that. The second thing is on Leave Your Mark's podcast. I have 2 interviews, one with Christy Hurt, who's a recruiter in luxury and fashion. She goes through her entire recruiting process and mentality and what she looks for when she's reviewing. And the second podcast interview is with Lauren McGoodwin, who has a new book out now called Power Moves. And she actually she's the CEO and founder of Career Contessa, which is a professional site that helps 5 million women a year. And when she graduated college, she's like, I checked all the boxes. She's like, I had the best experience, I had the best grades. She's like, I came out of school thinking I have got this job hunt down.
Mm-hmm.
And then the recession of 2008 hit.
Yep.
So she really details how to find work in a recession, which I think is highly relevant for the period right now.
Right.
So long answer to your short question.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was great. And I'm going to make a note of those two things you said and bring those into my classes. In terms of the resume, what are some of the like technical skills that you think stand out the most? So like, is it the Microsoft programs? Is it more of the technical Adobe programs? What do you think is the most beneficial?
So I think it really depends on the role and the department you're going for. Like if you're a creative person, well, you better know Photoshop, right? So if you're a marketing person, you better know Excel.
Mm-hmm.
If you know Google Analytics, that's important too.
Right.
So, if you're going into e-com, there's a whole other list of skills. So I think one of the best tricks when thinking about the skills to list on your resume is to look up jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed.com and look up, let's say we're talking about e-commerce manager.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look up e-commerce manager, and this is actually advice directly from Lauren the Goodwin, so I will give her the credit.
Mm-hmm.
She was a recruiter at Hulu before she started her company, and she recommended look up, let's say, e-commerce manager at 5 different companies that are in the same industry.
Mm-hmm.
Print out the job profiles that they put up.
Yep.
Circle the common words and the common skills that all 5 companies are looking for,
Mm-hmm.
and then make sure that those are reflected on your resume.
That's great advice. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of times kids think like, oh, I'm organized and I'm a team player, but I tell students like, those are not really skills that are going to
right. And those are also subjective.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say you're organized and a team player and a great communicator. I mean, the girl with the pink resume said that also. And I was like, well, says who? I mean, says you?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yep, definitely. So how would you say technology like overall has changed your career or like your current job, either for like good or for bad?
Okay, immensely. So to give you a background, after I left my internship at Harper's, that internship got me a real job, my first job,
Mm-hmm.
which was at Marie Claire magazine in the accessories editorial department. I was there for 2 years. I then switched over to corporate communications at Donna Karan and DKNY. Mm-hmm. And I ended up spending 17 years of my career working as head of communications for Donna Karan and DKNY.
Wow, that's rare to stay at a job for such a long
time.
Yeah,
and it was a very magical place, I will say. So the reason why I bring that up is because in 2009, fashion brands weren't really on social media yet. It was really like everyone kind of had a Facebook page, but that was sort of it. Mm-hmm. And I created an anonymous Twitter personality called DKNY PR Girl.
Okay.
That was the first example in fashion for humanizing a brand on social media that wasn't the designer. Mm-hmm. So this is like a fictitious character that was represented by a fashion illustration. And I basically wrote her tweets. I spoke for her. Yeah. And I did that for 2 years anonymously. And then in 2011, I came out as the person behind the Twitter handle because it had gotten very, very big. Mm-hmm. And so digital, essentially, even though I had this full career prior, what I'm most known for is my digital strategy. Mm-hmm. That personality on Twitter, of course, I had a blog. I was on every platform with DKNY PR Girl. And that led to an editor from Grand Central Publishing calling me up one day and saying, I think you should write a book. Mm. That totally was the impetus for everything else. So without DKNY PR Girl and being sort of on the forefront of digital for a company, I would not be where I am today by any means, because that was what set it off.
Yeah. what do you think gave you like that initial idea, that initial spark in you that wanted to create the Twitter handle?
So it was really kind of practical because I felt like we knew Facebook was like very like simple in a way. It's like, we'll put up content and then people will like that, right? It's like they'll comment, big deal.
Yeah.
But then we knew, even though we weren't on Twitter yet, that Twitter was, known to be more of like a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And my big concern when we were sitting around in a marketing meeting was, if the Twitter handle is at Donna Karen, people will assume she's speaking. And then me as a publicist, that creates problems for me, because then who's writing that copy? Who's speaking on her behalf? Who's vetting it? It was just a whole ball of wax that like I did not want to deal with.
Right.
So it was actually Gossip Girl season 2 at that time. So I thought, well, why can't we just make like an anonymous character like Gossip Girl? Why can't we like call her DQI PR girl? And that was literally it.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
So when it comes to fashion, there's people think, okay, fashion designer, or I can work in marketing, but there are so many other little intricacies. What advice do you have for someone? Because I think sometimes it can be overwhelming. Like you go onto Indeed and like, what do you type in the box? Or like, how do you know, okay, I'm good at this or I'm good at that? Like, what advice do you have for someone that knows they want to work in fashion, but doesn't know exactly which part of it?
Sure. So I think that's where networking comes in, and at reaching out, like really doing your research and thinking about, okay, narrow it down. What are 10 to 15 companies you would die to work at? And then looking through on LinkedIn and seeing like all the different types of creative jobs there are within the brands. And then reaching out, listen, not everyone's going to respond, but people I think are more gracious than not usually. And reaching out and just saying, listen, I'm a huge fan of the brand that you work at. I see you've been there for a long time. I'm a student. Is it possible to set up a 5-minute phone call so I can hear a little bit about what you do in your day-to-day? Because it's really hard for us to understand what these jobs entail. And I think that is, and even if someone doesn't respond, you can try other people. Like, I think that is the best way. And then what you're doing besides having this sort of like informational conversation, which is benefiting you, you're also making a connection with a person. So you're able to have this conversation and then hopefully keep that person in your network as you progress.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, the networking, getting an internship, things like that, like you said with you didn't know you didn't like working in hospital until you did it. So I think trying it on and before you.
I'll give you a really specific example. So a girl that I barely know on Instagram. I mean, we follow each other, but like, I don't know her. She reached out to me on email and she said, I don't know if you're looking for an intern. This is like a couple months ago, but I have this really great family friend. Their daughter is in school right now. She's studying fashion. She's in graduate school. And I think her classes are at night and she has some time on her hands and she really just wants to get her experience up. Would you be willing to talk to her and see if it's a fit? So we ended up having coffee and she ended up having like all this experience working on other people's podcasts. So she's like my podcast intern. So she's been helping me out with that. So, using your network and trying to figure out ways to like just get the experience is really valuable.
Definitely. Another question I have is a couple of my students have like their own clothing brands or things that they're looking to start and they use Instagram to promote it. And some of them feel, okay, well, how can I reach more people or how can I grow this business? How can someone give me a chance? I can't just survive off of Instagram followers and things like that. So what advice would you have for someone that
Well, I mean, I have like my pre-pandemic and post-pandemic advice. It's hard. So there's two different questions you're really asking. One is how to sort of grow that social presence to get the brand bigger. But the second is how do you really scale a brand and actually, make revenue happen? It's really tricky. I would say, Instagram is a really powerful tool. And if you do set up, like if you do have the capability to produce in small quantity yourself, you can very easily set up a website and sell through Instagram. I think the days of hoping for a big department store to carry your label are over. And actually, this is a beauty example, but Carissa Bodner, who's this week's episode on Leave Your Mark, she's the founder and CEO of Thrive Cosmetics beauty brand. And I just posted this on my Instagram, but she very candidly shares that she wasted the first 2 years of her company trying to be accepted by beauty industry standards, trying to get a retailer to care about her brand. And because she felt like if she's not sold in a department store, then she's not real.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, she finally said, you know what, I'm just gonna go it alone. And she really regrets wasting that time. So I think if you can figure out, and again, like connecting with people that have really specific core competencies. So for example, finding someone who understands production, super important, who understands where to source from, like thinking about the pricing model, thinking about how you would get something made, where you would get it made. Rebecca Minkoff is another great example. We did each other's podcasts a couple months back, and she said that one of the first big mistakes she made on her brand was she got all these orders, which was super exciting, but she never once thought about what the clothing would be packed in and how it would show up to the account. And she had someone who was smoking in her warehouse.
Oh, wow.
And she never thought about this, but of course, smoke is going to attach itself to the clothing.
Right.
And one of her first accounts, someone who had bought like, I want to say like 5,000 pieces, like a big order, opened the box and it stunk from cigarette smoke.
Wow.
And it was packaged really poorly. And he said, I'm not accepting this. And he canceled the order. Wow. So really kind of tapping into people who are working in these specific niche areas of the business, I think is essential, because you're not going to know everything yourself. So you have to be able to sort of almost put together your own advisory board of different people who can add different value.
Definitely. That's good advice. Now, in terms of like the industry overall, you know, with brick and mortar declining and the growth of e-commerce and, you know, everything that's going on right now, where do you kind of see fashion heading? I know that's like a really big question, but what do you?
So I think there are a lot of brands who really can't blame the pandemic for what's happening to their businesses right now. Like Neiman Marcus has been in trouble for years.
Yeah.
J. Crew has been in trouble for years. So this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think what we're seeing right now is a little bit of a Wild West chaotic situation, because without directive, and I know the CFDA and the British Fashion Council are working together right now, and probably also you know, other countries as well. They're working together to sort of figure out how to rebuild this system, which has been broken forever. Like when I was at Donna Karan, so I left in 2015, probably 5 years, probably 2010, Donna Karan was ranting about the fact that the seasons make no sense. Why are we buying coats in July, like, or in June for pre-fall? Like she was incensed about this, that why we should be selling bathing suits in June, not coats. And it was one of those things where we would always say, like, you're right, but like the whole system has to change. Like, and it's not one person who can do that. Everyone has to come together. So we were waiting a really long time for sort of directives, right? And I remember, you know, even with Fashion Week, everything was sort of like up to the brand. Like if you want to show, show. If you don't want to show, don't show. Which I think is hard because they're, especially the smaller brands, like people need to fit within a certain schedule because the buyers are only coming in like they only have budget to come in like one time, right? And if they're going to come in, they're not going to spend a whole month in New York going from appointment to appointment. So there does need to be some order to it. And now, like, I don't know if you saw, but like Gucci, Alessandro, Michelle posted sort of what Gucci is going to be doing, and they're no longer abiding by any seasonality whatsoever. Never again going to say fall, pre-fall, resort, nothing.
Okay.
It's completely, he's coming up with an entire new thing. YSL posted on their Instagram also, they're coming up with an entire new calendar for themselves. So that's great. That's what the industry needs. But if everyone's going to do their own thing, I don't know how stores buy the collection. Like, I don't know. It just seems like, you know, I know Gucci said they're going to show twice a year. Okay, fine. Is it going to be the same time period that like all these other brands are going to have appointments? Like, then it becomes like the unraveling of an industry that has been organized for so long. So it's a mess. I mean, it's a mess. And then consumer behavior, I don't know. I mean, are you going back into a store anytime soon? I'm not.
No, online shopping is where it's at.
Right. Right. So do we need stores? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.